Here it is, the final episode of the villains within the Batman universe. Now, I will be getting through the Women of Gotham in the next video, and then on to recasting Percy Jackson, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on those. But today we're talking about the last villains of Batman. Some more notable ones, and then just some weird ones. I did make my way through the comments of the last videos to see who you guys really wanted, and I tried my best to recast those characters. And to the best of my knowledge, except for one of these characters, none have really appeared on screen before, at least in a Batman film. And I always find it really interesting to attach an actor when they've never really appeared on screen before. Sure, Gotham had their take on some of these, but they never had a chance to get A-list actors like the films could. Because today we're tackling Professor Pig, ManBat, Calendar Man, the Ventriloquist, Killer Croc, and Hush. So let's recast Batman. First up, we have Professor Pig. Now, Professor Pig is definitely a character I could see popping up in a future cinematic version of Batman. I mean, it would be really interesting to take a look at this character from almost a horror perspective. I mean, his look, the creation of dolls, it definitely leans into that stereotype. Now with Professor Pig, a lot of things could be done within Batman, but the one thing he needs to be is creepy. I could see him being portrayed theatrically or very unnerving, but he definitely needs that edge. I kind of want to lead into that unsettling, but have someone who can just come off naturally like that, while being intelligent, because I want to see that scientist side before his breakdown into Professor Pig. That's why I went with John Carroll Lynch, who has played similar characters like this to perfection. I mean, you don't have to look any further than American Horror Story, but honestly, for me, it comes back to Zodiac, one of my favorite films of all time, with one simple yet really unsettling performance within the scene.
He also said that you made statements about killing school children.
That is horrible. That's a horrible thing to say.
So you aren't angry about being fired from Valley Springs for touching your students?
I'm not the Zodiac. And if I was, I certainly wouldn't tell you.
There's something to be said about how much he does in such little screen time. So John Carroll Lynch as Professor Pig. Next up we have ManBat, a character, along with some of the others on the list, that is a little bit more fantastical, and probably never seen on screen for budget purposes. Much like others on the list as well, he is a doctor, and he studies bats, and does research about their sonar abilities, and of course, he performs the trials on himself, and he turns into this. Now with a role like ManBat, the acting is as important as the movement of the character, and him really transforming. Honestly, I'd really like to see something done practically, similar to The Fly in the 80s. But just enhanced with CGI. That's why the only man for this job is Doug Jones. I mean, look at any of his performances, specifically him in Shape of Water. It's a really underrated performance. A lot of people don't give Doug Jones the praise he deserves for his acting as well. He has that movement down, but he's also a really wonderful actor. I'd like to give him the performance for both sides of this role, the bat and human side. And I'd like to see what he does with it. I'm very confident he nailed this. So Doug Jones as ManBat. Next up we have Calendar Man. Even from his name and really his original costume, he seems like a joke, but actually much like the Riddler, who relies on riddles, he can be really interesting. Calendar Man focuses on specific and significant dates, and within that constraint, you can get really creative. I want an actor who can portray the wit of Calendar Man, as well as I'd like to see him as almost a higher class status. I think would bring him from joke to a really serious character. And I really like the idea after he's been caught in Arkham, he's driven insane in solitary confinement because he can't track the days anymore. I'm with Mark Gatiss, who most notably played Sherlock's brother Mycroft in Sherlock. He shows the demeanor and the impulsiveness as well as the wit needed for this character. He also has an anger like a pot that's about to boil over. He's constantly on the edge, and I could see him going insane quite easily. But he also has that higher class feel that I'm going for. But still, I can see him leaning into that compulsive nature and really fleshing out this character.
You have an intermittent tremor in your left hand. Your therapist thinks it's post-traumatic stress disorder. She thinks you're haunted by memories of your military service. She's got it the wrong way around. You're under stress right now and your hand is perfectly steady. You're not haunted by the war, Dr. Watson. You miss it.
So Mark Gatiss as Calendar Man. Next up we have Killer Croc. Now Killer Croc obviously appeared in Suicide Squad, but I refuse to remember that because what they did with the character seemed like an incredible disservice. In a world where it seems like we're really pushing for more practical, there are just some characters that need to be fully CGI, and Killer Croc is a perfect example in Suicide Squad. I always liked the version of Killer Croc who was massive and a character living in the swamps that is not capable to do by just an actor himself. But I'd actually like to go a little bit darker and a little bit more of misshapen creature, similar to this. I still want to be CGI with motion capture, but by someone who has the movement of a massive man with a massive voice. I want him to be a bruiser of a character. That's why I went with Winston James Francis, who is 7 feet tall, 330 pounds, and has the voice to bring the life to this character.
What?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. He keeps going on and on and on, but he wants to fight you.
If he wants to fight me, I'm right here.
I think he has the build and the movement and the acting ability that would shine through so we can really see the physicality of this character. It's not just a normal sized man with a motion capture suit. It's someone who you could feel the weight of every step they take. I think he also has a face that would work well being blended with a crocodile. So Winston James Francis as Killer Croc. Next up we have the Ventriloquist, a character that I was surprised a lot of people requested. Now the Ventriloquist, as the name implies, is really two characters here. First, Arnold Wesker, who is a quiet, meek man who is rather unassuming, and then his dummy, of course, Scarface, who is kind of a 1920s pinstripe wearing madman. Although this does seem like a ridiculous character, there are some really interesting things to explore in the mind of Arnold, as well as his story bonding with the puppet is really interesting. Now for this role we need someone who looks unassuming, but can also turn. It really depends on if you want the actor to portray Scarface as well as Arnold, but either way I think Richard Jenkins can do it. He just looks so unassuming and has played roles where you feel like you can walk all over him.
I'm sorry, but could you stop the car because I need to go back.
But if he was going to voice Scarface as well, he's also played the most confident man in the room.
Oh, my two favorite nutsuckers.
I think he can nail the duality of this character, as well as if we wanted he could voice Scarface. If not, he's got the perfect face and demeanor for Arnold, and he just feels and looks like a man on his last leg who would turn to an inanimate object for guidance. So Richard Jenkins as the Ventriloquist. Lastly, we have Hush. Hush was by far the most requested character, and one that I think actually would work wonderfully in a franchise. I think he'd really have to be in the third film of a trilogy, so you can set up those previous villains, and then watch Hush and Riddler control them. Now I think he would work in any version of Batman you set up, but I think it would work especially well with Karl Urban in a more senior Batman. Now Hush is obviously the childhood friend of Bruce Wayne, and eventually a mastermind who works beside the Riddler, and he isn't the Riddler. Sorry, just angry at that unneeded change within the animated film. But we need an actor who is roughly the same age as Karl Urban, who is 48 years old. I went with Michael C. Hall, who I'm surprised hasn't donned a supervillain role yet. He has that calculating nature. He has that voice and a presence for this character. He is also only 1 year older than Karl Urban, and I can see them playing well together on screen. I think he has the build that would accompany Hush as well, and you can just see him saying Hush in that iconic voice of his.
Everything's different now. The memory of killing you will have to be enough.
So Michael C. Hall as Hush. So there are the last of the Batman villains. Like I said, we are going to be coming back to the females of the Batman universe, as well as I am going to be recasting Percy Jackson next. I've been reading the books in preparation, so I'm very excited for that, so make sure you subscribe. As always though, thank you for watching, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.